Understanding OAuth v2 in .NET Core begins with a solid foundation of its concepts. OAuth v2 is an open standard for access delegation. Commonly used for token-based authentication and authorization on the web, this allows users to grant third-party access to their resources without sharing their passwords. In .NET Core, this involves using middleware to handle authentication, ensuring safety and flexibility in your applications. The initial step is setting up your .NET Core project. Use the command line or Visual Studio to create a new project. Ensure you have the necessary NuGet packages, including Microsoft ASP.NET Core Authentication, OAuth, to provide OAuth services. Next, register your application with the provider you intend to use for OAuth. This typically involves creating client credentials like the client ID and client secret, which you will use to authenticate your application with the service provider. Moving on, you need to configure OAuth in your application's startup Cs file. This includes adding authentication services in the Configure Services method. Here, specify your OAuth options, including the authorization endpoint and token endpoint provided by your OAuth service. Remember to handle the scope, which determines the level of access you're requesting. It's critical to define the callback URL, where your application will receive the tokens after authorization. After setup, create the necessary controllers and actions to manage the authentication flow. Implement a login action that redirects users to the authorization endpoint. Once redirected, users will approve or deny access, returning them to your specified callback URL. In this action, extract the authorization code and request access tokens using the token endpoint. This involves sending a request to the endpoint with your client ID, client secret, and redirect URI in exchange for access tokens. Once you receive the access tokens, use them to access secured resources. With the access token, you can make API requests to retrieve user information or perform actions on behalf of the user. Ensure you handle token expiration properly, implementing a refresh token mechanism if the provider supports it, allowing your application to maintain a user's session without requiring them to log in repeatedly. Finally, always remember to secure your implementation. Store sensitive information like client secret in environment variables or secure stores, and not directly in your source code. Conduct thorough testing to cover various scenarios, including success and error flows in the authentication process. Understanding and implementing OAuth v2 in .NET Core empowers you to create secure and user-friendly applications that respect and protect user data.